Okay. We are in the Parrot room.
I don't have to click anything, right? You just click. Right.
Correct.
I've forgotten. Okay.
Where's the parrot?
Have we started?
Yeah.
We started? Okay.
That's the beauty of this thing. We catch you unawares in candid moments, and people get to see the real Mickey. They also get to see me eating these. By the way, we got a complaint about these. I'm going to read the complaint from a patron. Complaint is, Bob, you got a lot of nerve calling that inebriation. I guess in the regular podcast, I said that in the Parrot room, people would see me inebriated. And I don't know. If you don't drink at all and then you have 3 or 4 of these, you work up, a little bit of a buzz, say crazy things. You still there, Mickey? Mickey, are you alive?
Oh, sorry. Could you move up the teleprompter a bit? Yeah, okay.
Oh, your Joe Biden imitation. You need to look a little more cadaverish.
I'm happy to be here in the Parrot room with my friend Bob Wright, a great American.
Mickey, that's it.
You don't like my Joe Biden imitation?
It's not bad, but is the camera lower than usual? Because we're getting a lot of nostril.
The camera, they must have moved the camera.
Yeah.
They do all these things. Yeah. Joe Biden, if he wasn't nailed to the perch, he'd be an ex-parrot. What can I say?
Wait, if he wasn't nailed to the perch, he'd be an ex-parrot. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to have the first of my cocktails, Mickey. And maybe I'll warm up to your jokes. But first I've got to...
He's joined the choir invisible.
What's the choir invisible?
I think this is all a Monty Python routine, Bob. The Norwegian Blue.
Mickey, speaking...
He's an ex-parrot. If he wasn't nailed to the perch, he'd be pushing up daisies.
Speaking of Monty Python, somebody compared us to
Maybe
the comedy
it's the choir
team.
immortal.
Wait, what?
Maybe it's the choir immortal, not the choir invisible he's joined. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Your illusions are so far over my head. You went to a prestigious Ivy League school.
As did you, Bob.
Speaking of Ivy League schools, you know where I was on 9/11, Mickey?
No.
I was at Penn. You know why I was at Penn? Because if the class had not been canceled that day, I would have started teaching my course, which I ultimately did teach that semester, called Religion and Human Nature. Ironic.
There you go. I recommend people read this article, which I just tweet. I tweet out every 9/11 by my friend Rebecca Liss. Have you read that one? It's in Slate. It's like the most popular article they've ever published, or maybe like maybe in the top, just in the top 10. But it's she was telling this story after 9/11 about this guy who was an ex-Marine who was a stockbroker in Connecticut, and when he saw on TV the towers get hit, he told his boss he was taking the day off, and he went and got a Marine haircut. And then he went to his priest, and then he went to his locker and got his Marine uniform. And he drove in his Porsche at 90 miles an hour from Connecticut to the World Trade Center on the theory that if he was wearing a Marine uniform, they would let him pass security onto the pile. And damned if it didn't work. He wanders onto the pile, and the unionized people, the cops and the other searchers, have been pulled off the pile because it's too dangerous, okay?
Yeah.
So they're not going on the pile. This guy goes out on the pile where he meets another Marine who's done exactly the same thing.
Now, wait, are they both real Marines or former Marines who had kept the uniform?
Both former Marines.
Okay.
They're both former Marines.
Okay.
But they're in their uniforms because
I think it's actually pretty weird that 2 different people would have this idea, but
well, they met there, and
okay,
nobody believed this guy met another Marine until he was discovered later. And I think there are photographs showing it. But And they wandered around the pile saying, U.S. Marines, if you can hear us, yell or tap, okay? And eventually they heard something, and they were the only two guys. They were the only guys who rescued anybody. There were 3 people rescued of the whole tower, and they uncovered 2 of them.
Is this really documented and verified?
Totally documented.
I don't mean to cast aspersions on the credibility of your friend.
Totally documented and verified. And of course, when they made a movie of it with Oliver Stone directing, they got the story of the unionized guys, and they pushed this guy's story into a little sidebar snippet. And he was well played. He was played by a guy who looked, but they sort of portrayed him as a religious fanatic, which he may be. I mean, those are the guys that will do a crazy thing like that. And his name is Dave Carnes, and the movie sucked, so you'll never see the story.
This doesn't sound like an Oliver Stone movie, but I guess he was swept up in 9/11.
Well, he needed work, and they paid him a lot of money to direct this movie. It was terrible. It involved.
By the way,
Nicolas
I
Cage.
had an encounter with Oliver Stone once, and it did not endear me to him. But go ahead.
Anyway, James Walcott predicted it would be a good movie. Boy, was he wrong. Or he predicted that I was wrong when I predicted it would be a bad movie. But read this Rebecca List piece. She told it. She told it to Slade just as she told it to me, and it's an incredibly gripping story. And the whole 9/11 thing should have made a great movie, because the guy, there's this guy who's an ex-Marine, a crazy civilian who just wanders onto the pile bravely, and then the medic who saved them. They were underneath all the wreckage, and they could have gotten crushed at any moment. The medic who saved it was a defrocked doctor who'd had a drug problem, and he was, doing the same thing. He just figured this is something good he could do, and his chance, I guess, was the chance to vindicate himself. And he was also a hero in terms of saving these people. He actually got in under the pile and was risking his life doing that. So that was in the New York Times. But the Rebecca List piece in Slate is quite moving. I tear up every time I talk about it. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little misty-eyed, but not very. Anyway, I think you kind of spoiled the plot for me. I'm not sure I'm going to have to read the piece.
Okay, but it's got a lot. It's true, and it's got a lot of detail.
Let's see. Anything else 9/11 related? Oliver Stone. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
For some reason, Oliver Stone triggered synaptic firings that led to Michael Moore. And I have a question. So, Michael Moore got in trouble with progressives for a documentary, casting doubt on conventional progressive solutions to climate change or something? Are you up on this?
I forget. I know he got in trouble, but I forget what it said. Sorry.
I need somebody to explain it to me. Apparently, you are not that person.
I'm not that person. The rapper Killer Mike got in trouble for meeting with the governor of Georgia, which seems to me entirely a positive thing.
Now, is he the one who came on TV when CNN headquarters was under siege in Atlanta and said, "Hey, cut it out"?
It's possible. I
think he was.
I think he gave a great rap speech. Was it during the campaign? And I believe it was either for Bernie or Warren. I forget who.
I think he appeared maybe with the mayor of Atlanta in the early days of the George Floyd protests.
Anyway, the more politicians can get out of their cave of privilege, Bob, and talk to people, it's a good thing. I remember when the Crips in Los Angeles had a welfare plan. It was basically the same as my welfare plan. They said we should stop giving cash to people. We want jobs for our men. That was actually Daniel Moynihan's plan. My plan would be give jobs to everybody. But so you could talk to the Crips and find out a lot. If you live to tell the tale.
If I were you, I would have emphasized that a little more in the branding than you did. I think Crips is a more intriguing association than Workfare.
I don't know if the Crips are a big book buying constituency, though. You know, last time I said that Jim Stewart had it in for Bill Gates, and there was a book coming out. I don't think there's a book coming out. I think Stewart's published the book he's going to publish recently. He may be working on another one, but he was on TV talking about how Gates is in trouble for Epstein. And he wrote a big article in the New York Times over a year ago, I think.
Why would Jim Stewart, if he's the one I'm thinking of, be emphasized? Isn't he the guy whose claim to fame was long that he's the world's leading authority on interest rates or something?
No, he wrote a lot of books on stockbrokers and inside trading, but he's like an investigative reporter.
Oh, okay.
He's a very good investigative reporter.
Who wrote the Interest Rate Observer or a newsletter or something called the...
I don't know, somebody else.
So what's this guy's name?
James B. Stewart. He's written a series of best-selling investigative books.
So you're just correcting your earlier claim that
I'm correcting my earlier misconception and well,
it's a little early for that. We should plant more misconceptions during the early part of these and then later clean up the last week's misconceptions.
Okay. One thing I forgot to talk about in the regular podcast, so this is a non-salacious topic I'm bringing up now, is I've noticed that, did you see that Twitter announced that it was going to ban people from declaring that the election was over if it's not actually over? So so if Trump is ahead and somebody says Trump's won, it's over, even though they haven't counted all the mail-in ballots, they're going to take that tweet down. And you're exempt if you're a established network. So if Fox TV calls it for Trump, their tweet stays up. And I've noticed that as the big Silicon Valley people move to control speech and basically censor speech and try to manipulate the conversation, they've moved into a sort of class system of speech. So if you're a big boy, your tweet gets to stay up. But if you're a little person, your tweet gets taken down. Although in this case, they really are worried about Trump. They said if you're a politician trying to claim victory wrongly, we're going to take you down. So it's a little more ad hoc and ad hominem than just a class system, which would at least be rule bound. But it's a very disturbing trend. I'm of course very sensitive to class distinctions in speech. Speech is a fundamental right. It shouldn't be distributed by class. And I noticed that my Substack newsletter, Google has decided that while the New Yorker's newsletters get sent to my regular mail, Substack newsletters get sent to promotions, where they're in there along with CVS ads and Crate and Barrel ads and fundraising appeals.
Yeah.
So that's another example, and I have two, Bob. Two is all it takes. Another example of class First Amendment privilege as enforced by Silicon Valley.
Well, I think that one's an accident, probably. But I have a email client on my smartphone that actually has a newsletters. It has a 3-tiered thing: regular email, promotions, and newsletters, and it will put your Substack newsletters into newsletters. But
then nobody will read it. It'll be in like a separate third category, which nobody will even bother to open.
Yeah, but I don't think that's intentional on Google's part. Do you? They're not
I don't
trying
know.
to suppress...
I don't think it's only for Substack newsletters. I think it's for a lot of newsletters.
Right.
Well, they hate newsletters. Why? Newsletters are people expressing themselves. Why shouldn't that go in the regular mail? Well, I don't understand why this whole separate promotions thing seems ridiculous. Why not just put the regular promotions?
A lot of people consider it a service. You collect a lot of stuff that you're getting that you don't really want to pay attention to, including some newsletters. Although, if
let them market themselves and let them market themselves. Anyway, it's very similar to the journalist privilege, which threatened to enshrine some sort of weird notion of press that wasn't available to everybody, and said, well, if you get hired by Ben Bradley at the Post, you get a journalist privilege from testimony. If you're just Joe Schmo, independent reporter, you don't get the privilege. There was an actual formal doctrine proposed by UCLA law professor Mel Nimmer that basically said we should have a a corporatist view of the press, which is if you're hired by the big boys, you get privileges that other people don't. And the problem is the Constitution says speech guarantees freedom of speech or of the press. That implies that the press is something different than ordinary speech. So that was the hook that Nimmer had. Anyway, so that's 3 examples, Bob. What more do you want?
It's amazing. Yeah, Twitter, where to begin? Twitter does, whether intentionally or not, do the velvet rope thing. Have you figured out how to get a blue check yet? I haven't. No, I think they're still in suspension, right? Have they suspended?
They've started to let some people get blue checks, but nobody can figure out what the rationale is.
Explicitly? It says it on their website now?
No, but people have noticed. People have noticed it. I think it's just completely ad hoc by personality.
Happened like 18 months ago or something. I think it was Jane Mayer.
Right,
who just said, hey, my adoring followers, lobby Jack, or however she put it.
No, she didn't do that. She said, hey, Jack, can I have a blue check? And Jack gave her a blue check.
Well, but all of her followers echoed her or something.
But she didn't explicitly invoke them, I don't think.
The big question is, which would you rather have running your social media? A Mark Zuckerberg who is very smart, but totally without any ethical gyroscope, so far as I can tell, completely amoral and devoid of earnest intent, or Jack Dorsey, who is very earnest at some level, really wants to do the right thing and would even be willing to sacrifice profits, but is just so, I don't want to say anything I would only say after I've been drinking, but what is the word? He's just not very smart.
Jack Dorsey?
Oh, God.
You'll never get a blue check now.
No, but this is in the Parrot room. Is he a patron?
Well, he may hear, people have been known to talk about what goes on in the Parrot room.
What does it matter? He follows me on Twitter, and
he responded to a tweet of yours. You have an in with him.
Well, I DM'd him. I said, what's the deal with getting verified? When are you going to end the verified, the suspensions on
and verification? He said, I know. He said, I know
we're
it's taking a long time.
We're working on it. This was 2 years ago.
I didn't realize that was a DM. I thought that was a public tweet.
Yeah, and it isn't. Well, I would say 2 things. First of all, listen to an interview that the Daily did with him, which was very different from the average Daily. It was just an edited interview. See if you can convince me that he's Einstein. You really should listen to it. I was really amazed by how devoid it was of...
Maybe he's just hungry. He's been meditating too much. That's the problem.
Maybe that's
the
problem. He
goes on these heavy meditation retreats. The answer to your question is clear. You'd rather have Zuckerberg.
Would you? But Zuckerberg
is... they should act like a common carrier, which means if they're sort of amoral about who gets on and who doesn't, that's better than if they're trying to, as Twitter's obviously trying to do, trying to manipulate the conversation in the direction they like. It's more like they're becoming explicit. They're abandoning the idea that they're rule bound. They say, "Yeah, we're just a bunch of Silicon Valley liberals who are manipulating the conversation. Want to do something about it, buddy?" That's sort of more honest. But I would rather have Facebook.
But see, I think Twitter. I think they are earnest. I think Jack Dorsey does not think that he's trying to stack the deck. I think he thinks he's trying to do the right thing, and that's not even really the part that bothers me. They're just so inept in their execution, and they don't do they not realize what they've done with this verification system? First of all,
I think they know. Good.
See, I didn't care about getting verified for years and years, and then somebody, because it just seemed like a vanity thing, like a vanity plate.
Right.
And then somebody explained to me that no, it matters. A lot of people's settings, and some of them don't even realize it, but their settings favor verified people. They don't even see your tweets if you're not verified. So then I started asking about it. So they've set up this this system where they decide who the reputable elites are, and it's really an important distinction. And obviously, they should just get rid of the whole system if they are true progressives with any egalitarian values at all. But
Right,
they don't even. I didn't even think they comprehend that.
It's hard to believe they don't comprehend it. I assume it started off as a pitch to advertisers. In other words, the problem with Twitter was that it didn't make any money because nobody wanted to advertise on Twitter because there was such vile content on Twitter. And the blue check marks were a way to hive off a sort of supersphere of verified people who advertisers might want to advertise to.
No, I don't. I think it began much more innocently than that. I think the way it began was with people imitating other people. Like, you know, the way it says real Donald Trump?
Right.
That's because there were people pretending to be Donald Trump. That's not verification. That's a different response to the problem. But I do think verification arose when celebrities started getting confused with imitators of celebrities. And so it started off as a really top tier thing. Okay, this is the real Dustin Hoffman or whoever. I don't know if he's on Twitter. And then, you know, it kind of the standards slowly got down to like our level. And so in principle, I could have qualified if I had acted fast enough. But I don't think it was an advertising ploy. I really don't.
Well, it could have merged with an advertising ploy. Anyway, here's the question. If they gave you a blue check mark, would your ardor in defense of egalitarianism diminish? I know mine would.
No, I would still say I think they should abolish the whole damn system. But if they're going to have the system in place, I'm going to try to exploit it. But unsuccessfly. It really has been more than. In fact, I'm going to search on Twitter. I'm going to find this tweet. If
the Jane Mayer tweet?
No, the tweet where I DM'd Jack. This may not work because I'm on this new computer, which was the source of so much of my Yeah, I'm not even signed in. Never mind.
We were.
And
anyway.
I want to apologize to viewers of the regular podcast for my being so discombobulated and out of it. But
you didn't seem to anymore. You seemed as smart as ever, Bob. Somebody told me that once.
You're not setting the bar very high.
And I was too stupid to realize that that was a insult.
But let me. My excuse is I've been. So like 2 days ago, I drove a long way with a spouse who didn't want me to use a public restroom because she considers them unsafe amid a pandemic. What?
Did you make it? I didn't make it. I had to use a gas station.
You were trying?
I felt I was putting my life in peril.
I took various chemicals. You know, aspirin really works for about 4 hours. Did you know that? Try that.
I did not know that. So you learned something in the paragraph.
I avoided, let's just say I did not use a public restroom.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. You can try hard as you want, but I'm not going to say more than that, Mickey. Anyway, okay. and then we had all those tech troubles because of my new location and so on. And so by the time we got on the air with that podcast, I was ready for a nap. Yeah. And I think it showed.
We had promised to talk about basin superstructure.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
So.
Damn Parrot.
Yeah, we're getting right to the heavy stuff.
Well,
wait, let's soften them up with one final thing about your Epstein thing.
We've softened them up a lot, okay? But go ahead.
One more, but before I forget, your Epstein thing. You said there's a line in your newsletter where you're I don't know whether you're just you're making the case against the pedophile, the pedophile bait model, or you're just summarizing Eric Weinstein's case for the against the model or something. I forget who's saying
and
what.
We're using pedophile in the vernacular.
Well, that's my point.
Imprecise word.
That's my point. You say
not 13-year-olds, it's 15-year-olds.
Okay, but that's my point. You say, after all, how many pedophiles are there? Well, pedophiles, in a way, it's like racist and white supremacists. People, in order to stigmatize people they want to stigmatize, they start using it more broadly than it used to be used, and as a result, it loses some of its power. What it originally meant was people who actually had an attraction to sex with prepubescent people, a true, deep pathology in every conceivable sense of the word. And now it's extended to even to people who are sexually attracted to people who are like under 18, which, and my point was just, if you're asking how many men would be attracted to the woman that was in the picture with Prince Andrew, the answer is lots of men. That's not like, they're not pedophiles in the classic sense.
You're right. I think a lot of men wouldn't be, but,
well, especially if they knew her age, they might feel qualms.
No, but they're even.
Well, whatever.
Even many men. But anyway, you're right. It's a good point. Pedophile is probably the wrong word. They're jailbait, but there's not a good word to substitute for the barely legal would be one way of phrasing it.
But the term is still used by people as a form of condemnation who want to preserve the original power of the word, but they're actually applying it to people who are not pedophiles.
I have a feeling human trafficking is another word like that that's come to cover a lot of activities that are not as bad as what people think of when they think of human trafficking, which is young women in chains being forced to do various things.
Right.
So, no, that's a fair criticism, but I think even so, my criticism of Eric stands, which is you wouldn't enter this deal with Epstein unless he was offering something illicit that nobody else was offering, which would be barely legal people.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that there would have just been so many warning signs with this guy, but
Bill Gates didn't see him.
Well, no, we don't know.
Until it was too late.
We don't know that Bill Gates was involved with any of the women.
No, but he met, even under his theory, which presumably is the best way to cast it, he met with Epstein several times and had his people meet with Epstein several times before he realized that Epstein was a con man who he shouldn't do business with.
Yeah, well, that's
he didn't pick up. The people I know picked up on it immediately. Epstein gave them the creeps immediately.
Yeah.
They were women, so it was different, I guess. But he gave Eric
Weinstein says he picked up on it super fast.
He gave Eric Weinstein the creeps immediately too. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Eric Weinstein's a fascinating guy. They are fascinating brothers.
I listened to the first time I seen his podcast. It was impressive in that he delivers it basically without notes on video. Do you know you can see the video? Oh, so
he's not reading any of it?
There were little parts of it he read, but most of it he's just talking.
They are super long soliloquies. I mean,
he's very self-involved. So the Epstein one, he doesn't really get around to talking about Epstein until about 40 minutes into an hour-long podcast. And he is very defensive about Israel, but it's still worth listening to. I mean, he runs through a list of all the conspiracy theories that have proved to be true. He has that on a piece of paper. I think he has something on a piece of paper. But
well, he is conspiracy-minded.
That's very educational too. So he's an impressive guy.
Generically, he is a bit conspiracy-minded. What's the acronym he's trying to popularize?
Responsible conspiracism, something like that.
Well, no, but there's the system that suppresses.
I think it's the
truth.
DISC.
Yeah, the Distributed Information Suppression System or something.
Something like that. Yeah. He has all these acronyms.
And they try to suppress ideas like his. I mean, you could make the argument.
He has a bunch of acronyms and concepts, but go ahead.
So, yeah, as people may or may not know, he named the intellectual dark web as much as any single person did. He launched it, except for Barry Weiss, who gave it its critical piece of publicity in the Times. But and his brother Brett became famous for being at Evergreen College and taking a stand against wokeism, an extreme form of wokeism, and getting harassed and so on. And now they're both pretty well known. And Eric, of course, also, I guess, takes care of Peter Thiel's money, right? He manages Peter Thiel's money.
I don't know what he does for Peter Thiel.
But you could make the case.
He does work for Peter Thiel.
There is evidence that they are both, in some sense, cranks. I mean, they both have a grand theory. Eric's is apparently Eric's, if he's right, this is the grand unified theory that physicists have searched in vain for, right? Or deeper. It's even deeper. And he clearly is unhappy that when he was at Harvard, people did not receive it well. And I guess he didn't get the respect he wanted. Now, Brett's is in the realm of evolutionary biology, and he once tried to explain it to me on my podcast, and that was before I was kind of, what would the word be, excommunicated from all respectable members of the intellectual dark web after I wrote my Sam Harris takedown. But and it didn't make any sense to me at the time. I mean, who knows? But
He in the Epstein segment, he does take time to piss on string theory, which he says is just a fake theory that designed to keep people busy because there was absolutely no progress in physics.
That's a pretty common. That's a pretty common view in physics.
Oh,
now.
Okay. But he calls Epstein a construct, which is an interesting way to put it. But it's a little off because he seems to imply that they just found this actor who said, and said, hey, will you play this hedge funder and then enmesh all these politicians and, compromise the situations? And that makes it seem a little more artificial than it was. He's not a crisis actor. He grew organically into the role. He was a math teacher, and then he made a lot of money, and he, was a sexually, what's the word? Omnivorous, there must be a word. He was
an addict for one thing. I think he was pretty literally addicted to sex.
Sexual maniac.
Of a certain kind. And
so he grew into that organically, and then maybe he was discovered by somebody, or maybe he just traded information with a bunch of different people. But the idea that he was a completely fictitious character is not the case, I don't think.
No,
so
I
construct
think
is a little off. Calling it a construct is a little off.
No, I think. In fact, I suspect he was. He apparently was kind of fired from that prep school, and in his files it's put kind of vaguely, but I suspect they caught him hitting on the students.
You think? But
that's. I'm going to go out on a limb.
And you know who fired him, of course.
William Barr's father.
Correct.
Same guy who hired him. But meanwhile, he had made a valuable connection via one of the students, right? And that's what took him to Wall Street at a pretty high level. Yeah.
Okay.
It was her father worked on Wall Street. I think it was that Greenberg guy. What's his name? Ace or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a guy that brings me. Ace Greenberg was a guy, one of these rich guys who makes a big deal of their charitable giving. And I, of course, hate charitable giving by the rich. It seems to me that's like string theory. Instead of having a system that yields a just society, we have rich people who then, the substitute for having a just society is that rich people will deign to give back some of their money. It's just completely offensive to me. And what's especially offensive is the Warren Buffett Gates giving pledge. It just started talking. I don't know why it's talking. It's just babbling incoherently.
What if the bird slowly acquired autonomy?
Anyway,
that would be a good plot twist.
It's attacking me.
Yeah. Well, the thing that bothers me is how much philanthropic giving is guided by what will maximally elevate the social status of the giver, which often means giving to art museums, which are fine.
Right.
It's just that they are mainly the main beneficiaries of art museums are other pretty well-to-do people.
Or it's almost always something that is not going to transform society. Now, maybe if Bill Gates' small classrooms had worked, they would have transformed society and we'd all be living in an era where we spend more money on small classrooms, but they didn't work. maybe if he discovers a vaccine that the regular commercial vaccine makers can't discover, that would make it a difference. But most of the money is wasted. It was brought to my mind because somebody talked about Batman, Bruce Wayne, and said, why does he have to be Batman going around beating up people? Why couldn't he just give his money away like other rich people? And, if he signed the giving pledge, he would give his money away and virtually nothing would change in society. Why did Jeff Bezos' wife decide to sign the fucking giving pledge? It's an incredible waste of money, and it reinforces class privilege. It's like you want to make the slate list of 600 donors. You're so great, you're giving away your money. Well, no, it's inherently condescending.
I guess. I mean, I don't have anything against people who actually give away money. I actually kind of respect Bill Gates. I think he's serious. He's like doing the homework. He's doing the math. He's trying to save a lot of lives, and I think he can show that he's done it in straightforward ways by reducing the toll that malaria takes and so on. Nothing wrong with that.
It'll never make up for the suffering caused by Windows Vista.
That's a close call. Bill Gates, when I wrote a year after 9/11, my 10-part series in Slate called A Real War on Terrorism,
right?
He sent Mike Kinsley an email just about how much he liked that series.
Well, there you go. He was the only defender of Slate at Microsoft. He liked Slate. The rest of the company wanted to get rid of it.
As they did. We were going to talk base and superstructure.
He's going to need all the good publicity he gets. That's all I could say.
So I think
base and superstructure. Okay.
So these are Marxist terms. Marx himself didn't use the terms, but
really, didn't Engels?
Did he? Maybe.
I don't know. Anyway, okay.
Anyway, so it gets back to this idea that the real action takes place on the ground at the level of the base. Economic relations among people. Who's got the money? Who's got the power? What classes have the money and the power? And
what do you have to do to make a living?
What do you have to do to make a living?
And how good a living do you make?
How good a living do you make? Anything else?
No.
Anyway, concrete relations like that. And then the idea is that the superstructure, ideology, religion, and so on is ultimately responsive to that. I don't think it's meant to be so simple that ideas are a mere epiphenomenon. That is to say, which would mean that they are influenced by the base, but don't in turn exert any influence on it. But there is meant to be a sense in which the material stuff is in the driver's seat.
There's a debate, of course, within Marxists whether the superstructure takes on a life of its own and then cracks back and influences history on its own, or whether it's completely epiphenomenal. I'm in the epiphenomenal camp. I think basically things are determined by what's going on in the economy, and the rest sort of follows in due course. And I think you do too in your book Non-Zero. That
tends to be materialist, yes. And of course, the opposite in Marx's own terms, I think, would be Hegel, right? I mean, did Marx himself say, "I'm a dialectic, I have a dialectic like Hegel's, but it's a materialist dialectic"? Did he use those terms?
I would be surprised if he didn't. I don't know if he said he was turning Hegel on his head, but somebody said that.
So then, and the way this came up was I was talking about how I thought the New Atheists were wrong. They seem to think that, wait, the problem is these religious ideas. We've got to go change people's minds, and then everything will be wonderful. And I said, I think, my view is more nearly the opposite of that. So then one of our viewers, Thomas Muir, did as either a comment or an email, either a comment in Patreon or an email, an extended reflection on Chris Hitchens being an exception to that, because Hitchens had, at least for a long time, himself been a materialist. He was, I guess, a Marxist early on. Anyway, so Muir asked me the question, if I'm such a materialist, how can I believe that meditation could play a role in saving the world?
All right, you were going to answer that question.
That is the question I was going to answer or discuss. I don't know that I have an answer. I mean, I think, first of all, one thing I would just throw into the whole, I think it's very hard to wrap your mind around this idea of the relationship of ideas to material things. And to further complicate the matter, I mean, remember that according to one way of looking at the world, you could describe the whole system without reference to subjective states, right? It's like, say you're talking about, say capitalists are putting out, or let's say arms manufacturers have a lot of power and they're managing to place a lot of op-eds that are encouraging armament and war. Let's just say that as a thought experiment. That would be a materialist explanation of them like generating propaganda that leads to the war.
Right.
And they would be part of the base and they would control events. Now, of course, the ideas have to pass through the minds of the readers of the op-eds that they're generating. If it's a democracy, you need to get popular support. So they manipulate a bunch of people by writing these op-eds that pass through the minds of these people. Well, the one just wrench I throw into the works is you can describe this whole system without reference to the subjective experience of the people reading the op-eds. I mean, the op-eds actually, at one level, you know, there are words. Light reflects off the words on the newspaper. It enters my eyes. It generates certain brain things. The brain things generate other brain things. And then the ultimate outcome of that is later that day, I pull the lever and vote for the militarist for office, right? The point is just that this gets back to why the mind-body thing is such a puzzle. According to one view of the world, namely a view in which mind is itself epiphenomenal, you could describe everything you need to describe in order to explain everything that happens in the world without reference to subjective states. So I just want to throw that out there.
But what in meditation comes because meditation can have an effect because...
I'm not sure what my response to the meditation... I'm not sure what the relationship is between my response to the meditation question and that. But what I would say is that what meditation does is it makes the minds harder to manipulate in certain ways. Okay? So you're basically... you are making it harder for certain kinds of material relations on the ground, namely like power wielded by arms manufacturers in this case. You're making it less likely that that will translate into people voting for the militarists because generally speaking, that propaganda plays on people's emotions, and so they unreflectively get stirred up and get in this Wagnerian mode and get all patriotic and get manipulated. The idea behind meditation is it renders you less susceptible to manipulation by various powerful interests. Or not powerful interests, but the fact is the powerful interests are the ones that have the power to manipulate you by definition. Okay?
I guess I would say that if supporting the war that the militarists are promoting made you unable to feed your family, you're not going to support the war. So that's a basic materialist.
Wait, say that again. If supporting the war made you unable to feed your family.
Feed your family, you're not going to support it. And that's the most important thing is, you know, how are you going to feed your family? And that and meditation and your mindset you won't even adopt meditation if it doesn't fit in with your material interests, and it just still seems a little epiphenomenal to me. I mean, it ain't going to convince you to starve your family.
Okay, but I would say that I'm just saying I don't. What do I want to say? I don't think that encouraging people to meditate. I mean, first of all, again, you could describe meditation in the strictly physical terms. It changes the structure of your brain such that the physical input from the newspaper is less likely to lead to the output of you pulling the lever on the key. You can describe the whole thing in physical terms, but that aside, I just don't think it's not the same as. I mean, you tell me what is an example of somebody advocating something that seems to imply a non-materialist view of base and superstructure? Like, what's an intervention at the superstructure? What's a classic intervention at the superstructure?
There's a classic example on the right, which is people blame the epidemic of fatherlessness on radical ideas of family and sexuality propagated by the counterculture, as if, this idea, these nefarious counterculture ideas in the elite trickle down to the lower classes and cause them to have children out of wedlock, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of people on the right who hew to this, blame the counterculture, and in fact, I would say the main factors are deindustrialization, the inability of men to find a job as that enables them to support a family, all the William Julius Wilson things, plus as people grow more prosperous, another material factor, marriage is the first thing they throw out the window. When you gave people the guaranteed annual income, the first thing they do is they get divorced because they're just sticking with this partner who they really don't like, just because that's the only way they're going to survive. And once they have the money to leave, they're going to leave. So when people reach a certain level of prosperousness, single parent families sort of start to naturally proliferate if they can get away with it. And I think, and things bubble, ideas like free love and the end of the family bubble up from the underclass to the elite rather than flowing down from the elite to the underclass. So it's really driven by the substructure of the economy and not the superstructure of free love. That would be one example.
Well, tell me, what do people who say it comes from the realm of ideas, it comes from these professors who blah, 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 what do they say to the reply that, well, then by definition, the professors must have a certain kind of power? I mean, they have secured control of important levers of communication, so isn't even this a materialist explanation? I mean, this is why the whole thing is so hard to think about.
I don't quite see it. I don't see professors as part of the mode of production. If you're a Marxist, the mode of production is the important thing, and the mode of production of feudalism was you were at a certain stage in the feudal society, and the mode of production in capitalism is wage labor, and you go look for a job, and somebody bosses you around. And it just seems to me that's. Until we're all professors, that's the important thing. Now, maybe we'll see. Maybe Twitter and professors can exercise such control over the dialogue that unsupported ideologies like Trumpism can't take hold. I don't think that'll last more than one election. You need somebody as incompetent as Trump to stop the dissatisfaction with the forces of production from producing a populist revolt.
It does seem a little bit of a puzzle to me that I think we are in a time when the ideas coming out of universities are in many ways so at odds. Maybe it's long been true, but so at odds with kind of the wishes of. I don't know that they are, though. I was going to say the capitalist class, but in a lot of ways, I mean, there is this. On the right, you're hearing these complaints about woke capitalism, right? The idea that these capitalists are happy to be in bed with, and advocate for diversity and.
But that's driven by material forces, which is that the intellectual elite, who tend to be liberals, have all the money. So if you're a capitalist trying to sell things, you're going to suck up to the liberal middle class and upper middle class, because that's where all the cash is. You're not going to suck up to the deplorables who have no money anyway. So if you're selling sneakers, You ain't going to come out with a right-wing sneaker that says, hey, this is the Trump sneaker, because the demand for the Colin Kaepernick left-wing sneaker will be 20 times that. So that I have a completely materialist explanation.
But what
that.
about the support for diversity of a kind that encompasses ethnic groups that don't have a lot of money? I mean, you know, which, you know, the current diversity push encompasses.
Well, I think that's heading for a reckoning. So
of what kind?
There'll be a clash with the economic substructure, and somebody will win and somebody will lose.
Here's what I think is that a certain kind of cynicism that you probably hear more on the right than on the left may have something to be said for it, which is that kind of capitalist elites are trying to buy off the minorities cheaply, in the sense that what they're doing is helping a relatively small number of minority elites. I mean, that's what conspicuous diversity pushes do, right? You give Joy-Ann Reid a show on MSNBC, and you hire so-and-so as a vice president of corporate affairs, and you do this and you do that. And in the end, It's a lot cheaper than actually providing, and a lot less at odds with the economic and business models you prefer than actually getting jobs to a ton of low-income people.
It's cheaper than stopping your flow of cheap foreign labor and cheap goods from China, which would get jobs to Americans. That's for sure. If that's the point you're making, yes.
Well, I mean, to include, those kinds of things would be included. I don't think they're the end of the list. I just think it's So I saw a reference to this in a Ross, a kind of veiled reference almost, in a Ross Douthat column a couple of months ago. The idea that just, you know, this is just rearranging the chairs among elites, kind of. But are any people making the argument in a more thoroughgoing way, like that you're starting to articulate? People of your persuasion or whatever.
Making what argument?
Well, the argument that wokeism, it purports to be something that's in the service of African Americans, but 90% of African Americans get nothing out of it whatsoever. Precisely because that would cost more money. That would be more of a dislocation. And that would be hard. That would take resources and work, and it's easier just to buy off African American elites. That argument.
I think that argument gets made all the time. Yes.
Well, where? Who's making it?
Bloggers on people on my Twitter feed. Ryan Jerdusky. Various populists.
Nobody's written the definitive piece, though.
I don't know if I assume somebody has attempted. How could it not have happened? But I haven't read it. But here's another possible example. It relates to gay marriage, because gay marriage is something that probably is sort of new in human history. Yet it happened, and I think it's firmly entrenched. Was there a material basis for that? And going back, was there you would know about this more than I did. Was there a material basis for the similar imposition of monogamy? Previously most societies had polygamous relations of men, and somehow it sure looks like the superstructure decided, no, we want one man, one woman, no matter what the natural predilections of our brains are. And that worked. That was an innovation that worked, and it'll probably work for gay marriage too. But is there any material explanation for that shift at all? There must be.
Well, for monogamy?
Yeah.
Well, the one I played around with in my book, The Moral Animal, was that it was a reflection of more equal distributions of power among males that tended to accompany democratization of political systems. If you look at polygamous countries, they tend to be associated with very sharp status and
Right.
wealth differentials among males. And they tend to be authoritarian because if some guys are going to monopolize all the women, they're going to have some unhappy campers who are getting no women at all, and you're going to have to be pretty repressive to keep them from rebelling. That's how offensive is this sounding to people who are inclined to be offended by the the fact that it's a totally male-centric view of the thing, but the fact is that's where the power was when this happened.
Right.
I mean, and
so how did this equal distribution of power come about? I assume it came about through capitalism, no?
That's an interesting question.
The rise of the bourgeoisie and all that.
Yeah, that is possible. I'd have to look more carefully.
But monogamy happened way before the rise of the bourgeoisie, so that's a problem.
I mean, it happened, but I mean, look, you get in hunter-gatherer societies where there's very little inequality in material resources among males, you often have something pretty close to monogamy. It's not a very polygamous system. So it's not like it had never surfaced on the planet, but then when you get then you get like, chiefdoms where with agriculture you get these much more unequal systems for many centuries to come, and you tend to get males at the top sexually monopolizing large numbers of women.
Okay, so materialism is alive. Thank you. Although it doesn't explain gay marriage.
Gay marriage. I don't have a comparable...
Was there any... Maybe the shift to more... I'm about to cancel myself, so I will shut up.
Come on, go ahead.
The shift to more creative, less physical labor, making a lot of money, empowered a lot of gays to want marriage.
I can't believe you said that. You are toast. That is, Mickey, that is some seriously bad judgment. And we're not going to edit it out. But I'm afraid this is the end of the Parrot Room. Because, so wait, you're saying...
I just tried to think of a crazy theory that would give a materialist basis for the demand for gay marriage. That why does it work now as opposed to working before?
Yeah, but isn't there something broader that's gone on, which is just more tolerance for minority lifestyles in general? Less insistence on homogeneity?
Right, and you can describe that to the arc of history, or you can describe that to prosperity.
Yeah, I don't.
I would tend to favor prosperity, but
it's a good question.
I may be wrong,
or it could just be historical contingency. The fact that Andrew Sullivan wound up at the New Republic and wrote the big piece.
That would be the great man theory of history.
Yeah, Ross Douthat says that is one of the clearest examples he's ever seen of a single person, a single crusaderness, and making a big difference.
It made a big difference, and I thought it was sort of crazy at the time. So,
you mean gay marriage?
I thought it was a weird cause to pick.
I think a
lot of gays didn't even care that much about it, and
some of them actively disliked the connotation.
Right.
That they felt they were being forced into a more conformist kind of
right, and it was very establishment oriented and very conservative, but
I had just about
never
never
heard
heard
of
it.
It's the secret of its success.
Young people won't appreciate how almost unheard of the idea was before like the late 1980s or something. I went a long time without hearing anyone suggest the idea.
I don't. Yeah, I know there was an era when. Well, I don't know. Anyway, I'm not sure that there wasn't a demand for gay marriage going way back, and I guess it was gays in the service that I thought was really misguided. Gay marriage less so, but
you thought gays in the service was misguided on what grounds?
The don't ask, don't tell, because it was a huge fuss about, that was crippling the Clinton administration for no good reason, I thought. And it wasn't going to advance gay rights that much because how many gays wanted to be in the damn service? But
yeah,
I guess I was wrong about that too.
As a political matter, I didn't understand why Clinton had chosen to try to get that done so early on, because he did.
Yeah. Wait,
yeah.
What does this have to do with the mind-body problem? Why do you have to even bring the mind-body problem into this?
Into the base superstructure question?
Yeah, I mean, either material things are the driving force of what people think, or superstructure cultural ideas are, and that's true whether the mind, whether there is a mind or not.
I guess if you depart, one view of the mind-body problem is that consciousness, subjective experience, is itself epiphenomenal. So,
right.
My state of consciousness is influenced by the state of my body, but it cannot in turn influence the state of my body. So it's not like some immaterial conscious volition can force my body to do things. That's right. One view, is that consciousness is epiphenomenal. And I think whether you take that stance in the mind-body problem can influence the way the whole base superstructure question
you could easily have an algorithm that's cooked into your brain without any consciousness at all that is superstructural or base oriented. It doesn't matter whether you're conscious of it or not.
Well, no, I mean,
under my theory, you're programmed to feed your family, and it doesn't matter whether you think about it or not.
People are programmed to feed their families. I guess I'm just saying one problem with base superstructure is isn't it really just an eternal, loop of causality? Material structures influence ideas, but then ideas influence material structures. And I think it's easier to think of that as a truly airtight loop if you just depart with the subjective experience part on grounds that it's epiphenomenal. And just trace the physical incarnation of the ideas, but never mind. Mickey, we should start talking.
Those are the sophisticated Marxists who believe that culture cracks back on the economy. I'm a crude Marxist. I think the economy wins. I'm a vulgar Marxist.
So, Mickey, here's something from Superluminous. For Patreon conversations, we need Bob inhaling nitrous oxide and Mickey taking whatever drug he mentioned.
I know.
During their respective college days. Did you see that?
I saw that, and the I think you should get plastered, but I can't. I don't know quite why, but my experience with speed was so bad that I never took it again, and I don't want to question that because.
What about bong hits? Do you want to do bong hits for us? Is marijuana completely legal in California yet?
I don't know, but I don't like marijuana. It makes me into adult.
DOLT, or did you say
adult? More of adult and more lethargic. I mean, my problem isn't that I have too much get up and go, Bob. So I don't think
few of us have that problem.
I don't think smoking marijuana is going to help me.
I'm just trying to help our ratings, Mickey.
So I had something I wanted to talk about, which is, did you know that Ted Halstead had died?
I did. I tweeted about it. Sad. So he was instrumental in starting the New America Foundation. He was the first president.
It's just incredible because this whole thing was that he was the young whippersnapper.
He was 52 when he died, I think.
I know, but he once told you that I was too old and insufficiently solution-oriented to get a grant from him. So he was always
forgotten that.
He was always the younger guy.
He was.
And so it's just unbelievable that he died in a hiking accident, I believe.
Yeah, I still remember having lunch with him. It was a great feeling because he took me to a nice restaurant and offered me a reasonable amount of money to just be associated with the New America Foundation.
Well, I always thought the New America Foundation was where great minds go to never be heard from again. But it does seem to have supported the work of Michael Lind, who unfortunately has been completely right about the issues that I care about and has basically written everything I think a couple of years before I thought it. So he gets big points for allowing that sort of intellectual ferment to go on because it certainly departs from the consensus, that Trump voters revolted against.
He was very in touch with what became an important part of Trump's base from an early time.
Really?
And he was an economic nationalist, and I haven't read that much of his stuff at length.
This is Lind, not Halstead we're talking about.
Right, Lind.
Yeah.
No, I just mean, don't you agree? I mean, he used to emphasize the Scots-Irish a lot,
He and Pat Buchanan were people who I think have been vindicated by the passage of time.
Whether or not, whatever you think of their ideology, I think analytically he saw earlier than many that something was happening here. I just want to say quickly, in the early days, New America is now basically part of the foreign policy blob, but in the early days, and I don't know if Ted really tried to make this happen or just happened, but it was an anti-blob think tank back when I was there. And there were a few, Cheryl Schwenninger, Steve Clemens. There were people who really dissented from the Iraq War and from the whole direction of interventionist foreign policy. But then, as just happens, the what's the term? Is it the antibodies were expelled or no? Anyway, the antibodies expelled the anti-blob or something. But anyway, the foreign policy establishment's immune system destroyed.
The host rejects the transplant.
Yeah, and we'll see how the Quincy Institute does, which is the current hope for an institutional home for anti-blobness. Its work is cut out for it.
Was John Judas in New America?
No, but he's been on that wavelength for, he's been an economic nationalist for a long time.
Right.
But not so much in the Michael Lind mold. John's not like an ethno-nationalist, right? And wouldn't you say
think
that
so.
Michael is in some sense not I don't mean like a white nationalist, but you know what I mean, right?
He's sensitive to differences in ethnic cultures, yes.
Scots-Irish. The Scots-Irish.
And Jim Pinkerton, too.
I've got a lot of Scots-Irish in me. You know how I know?
You had 24andMe.
Well, I know. But I have somebody who, first of all, I have double cousins. You know what that means?
Means you're inbred.
No. Sounds like it means that. And what it does mean sounds like it means that. But here's what it means. It means my mother's brother married my father's sister. I know that sounds like incest, but think it through. Think it through. It just means they grew up in a very small community.
Right.
Now, that means that I have cousins who have exactly the same 4 grandparents I have. Not true of most cousins. So, one of my cousins took it upon herself to trace our ancestry, and her ancestry is mine because we're double cousins.
Yeah.
A lot of highlights I'd love to bore you with. But the main one is that this led me to learn that, you know what Scots-Irish are? You probably just think it's like a blend of Scots and Irish.
Yeah.
No. They're actually it's Scottish blood. It is a group of people who went to Ireland some number of centuries ago, a few hundred, stayed in Ireland for a period of time, more or less intact. There was probably some interbreeding, but basically, they remained a cohesive community and then came to America. So they were Scots who lived in Ireland for a while.
Huh.
Who knew? Now, I am also Irish, separate from that. So I am Scots-Irish in all senses of the word.
It turns out one of my grandfathers was an Arab. So I'm thinking of rebranding myself as a POC. You think that'll fly?
I'm willing to support you in that initiative. I'll start referring to you as my, what should I call you? I'll think of a term.
Okay.
I'm afraid to make a joke now because it could get me canceled. Once you've had 4 of those little chocolate liquor things, you got to be very careful.
Yeah, well, we're pounding the rubble here in terms of my cancellation, but but I know very little about my grandfather. But my uncle told me he was an Arab.
Your grandfather was an Arab?
Yes.
Well, in theory, you tell me, But, I mean, of course, Semitic, as a cultural matter, the Semitic language family includes Arab.
Right.
And one question is there similarly a genetic proximity of Jews whose origins lie in the Middle East going way back between them and Arabs?
I don't know. I think there's a Sephardim, maybe.
But aren't Sephardim just Jews who were in Spain during or what? Tell me what Sephardim are.
You've reached
don't know this?
limits of my knowledge.
What kind of Jew are you? You don't know the answer to that question? Your assimilation has gone overboard, Mickey.
I know. That's why the Orthodox Jews hurl epithets at me, and I'm a victim.
Okay.
And I feel unsafe. So no, I don't know the answer to that. He was also a communist and a Catholic, so
way ahead of my grandparents.
He was a complex person. I think that's how we doing on time. We're way over.
Oh, God knows we've talked. There's nobody listening at this point. Don't worry.
Well, they're waiting for the Frasier update.
See, here's the thing. Next week, I should arrange to have my dogs here. Two things. I mean, the reason my dogs have been hanging out in my office for so long is partly because my wife was not home. And now we're in this new place for some number of weeks where they're actually cordoned off from this part of the house. But next week I should have them up here for the Parrot room.
But Fraser's okay. He was on his deathbed last time we talked.
He is okay. He had an ultrasound. They didn't find cancer. He has some kind of kidneys problem that's manifest in various ways. But he's hanging in there.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a great dog.
That's what we want.
Are you a dog person?
No, I'm a cat person.
Oh man.
Because
I'm not against that, but
it's entirely a case of liking the species that likes me. Cats love me. I don't know
dogs
why.
would love you. Dogs love people. You're a person.
Cats. It must be something in my sweat. Cats smell me and they love me. They say, this guy's a pushover. I'll come and nuzzle him and he'll give me food.
Well, that's actually quite a tribute to you because, cats can be pretty indifferent to people.
I know. But I manipulate them like a pro.
So it sounds like, Mickey, you read the Patreon comments this time. Because I
read some of them.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Then you may already know, just quick updates. I had said, what is the politically acceptable replacement for mentally retarded? According to James Parker, it's intellectually disabled. And then there's some disagreement among patrons on whether the term neurodiverse includes the intellectually disabled or is confined mainly to people on the autism spectrum. I have no view on that. And then someone brings up developmentally disabled. And I guess that's all.
Which is insane because wasn't disabled the original term, and now we've gone full circle and come back to it.
Well, in the case of mentally retarded, it wasn't. No, I mean, I think, but there is the question of, well, why is one of these more pejorative than the other? The idea between mentally retarded was that development has been slowed or stopped, retarded. The development didn't fully happen.
Right.
And the term disabled, is that more or less pejorative? Of course, what happened is just that retarded became a pejorative that kids hurled in the schoolyard and acquired that negative connotation. And
the best column William Raspberry ever wrote was a column on when the African Americans was replacing blacks, which replaced colored as the word for African Americans. And he said, look, we come up with these new things and then they get tarnished by for various reasons, including the high crime rate of African Americans. So it becomes a pejorative and we replace it with a new one. And then it gets tarnished and we replace it with a new one. And, until you change the underlying circumstances, that's going to keep on happening. There's a similar sort of treadmill with there is something called the euphemism treadmill. I don't know quite what it is, but
Steve Pinker has written about this, how it's ultimately futile. It's like kids start saying, well, your father's a janitor, and so they change it to custodian, and then kids start saying, well, your father's a custodian, although I don't think they've started saying that yet. I haven't heard that. But anyway, there is that.
Anyway,
it's not the world's biggest problem, I would say, but
I think the definition of senility is if you've canceled yourself on a show, and by the end of the show, you can't remember why you're canceled.
And you can't remember?
I can remember why I'm canceled. I also can't remember why you're canceled.
I'm not sure I'm so canceled. I feel bad about having said about Jack Dorsey what I said about him. Not that I think it'll catch up with him.
It was something sexist about primitive societies and men having all the power and monopolizing the women.
Explaining the development of monogamy in terms of a redistribution of power among men.
As if women were epiphenomenal.
Well, they weren't phenomenal, but I don't think they didn't have much political power in those days.
Okay, well, tell it to Katha Pollitt.
I'm just stating the facts. You know, I debated her about this stuff twice.
I don't even know if she's especially PC. She's probably been canceled too, for all I know.
Quick anecdote from the Miami Book Fair, where which is one of the two places I debated her, just to show you how things were before the age of smartphone cameras, how things on the police brutality front were. I was riding in a cab with Mike Kinsley. There was a cop in Miami just in front of everybody. It was like, the road was full of cars. There were lots of people alongside. He's like marching a Latino kid who looks like he's about 13, is considerably smaller than the cop. He's got him by the back of the neck. And he's like marching him across the street. And the guy's giving no resistance. Maybe he had given the cop some lip. The cop trips him, gets down on top of him, and just starts punching him in the face. And, I mean, Mike and I looked at each other. It was like, the cab just drives on.
Yeah.
But, it is harder. I mean, however, any amount of police brutality is too much. But I got to think there's significantly less going on now that cops are getting used to the idea that anything they do may wind up on camera.
Yeah. That's base, not superstructure. Cameras develop, society changes.
I'm a total technological determinist. No, I'm a base guy.
Okay.
Insert joke here. I'm a base guy. Ozymandias wants me to explain the map behind me. He says, drop the coyness about the map behind you. This is the Parrot room you're supposed to come across as true, but the map's no longer behind me. Won't be for weeks. Maybe I'll explain more fully later. For now, I can say it's not a map of any actual territory. It doesn't correspond to any territory on the actual
Really?
Earth. Yeah. It's random. It's just random lines.
I'm shocked. Okay.
And I like that about it. I kind of wish the Earth were more like that, Mickey.
Imagine.
Exactly.
The Wright's most hated song ever.
I'm not in love with it because, it's a little too much of a superstructure song, No Religion too. It's a little too on board with the new atheists.
Yeah, there you go. If he were alive, he'd be a good get for your podcast.
So if anybody is still listening, because now we have a much smaller subset of people listening in the first place in the Parrot Room.
Right. I think we should.
What should they say to signify it in the comments? What code word? How about just Scots Irish? No. What?
That's fine. Or
no, but they might say that anyway because we actually said it. It has to be something we haven't said. I'm worried about this. I think maybe no one will deliver and will be crushed and dispirited. Blue Oyster Cult. Okay. Because that reminds me of an anecdote I can tell in the future involving Blue Oyster Cult. What's that?
Does it involve cowbell?
It involves my almost getting arrested in a way that would have significantly altered my life at age 18 or 19.
Because the famous More Cowbell skit involved allegedly Blue Oyster Cult.
What skit is that?
On Saturday Night Live when it's a famous skit where who's the now I'm really senile. The actor who was on the boat.
This is God's revenge for you calling Joe Biden a cadaver.
Right. The actor who was on the boat with Natalie Wood and
oh shit! Now you're giving me a senior moment.
Famous,
of course, the guy who was in the series To Catch a Thief.
I don't know. Anyway,
no, I'm not. We're not pressing stop record until we remember his name. This is terrible. Well, there were two. Wait, there were two. There was the guy I get it mixed up with Willem Dafoe.
It's a guy like that, but it's not
right. The guy I get mixed up with him, and then it was Natalie Wood's actual husband, who we can't remember. Come on,
it's not Christian Laettner because he was a center for Duke.
Oh shit! What does he have to do with it?
It's some name like Christian Laettner. We can't just tell people to email us the name. It's
the guy who looks a little like Willem Dafoe, right? Oh, but what
he plays similar characters.
Is it cheating to Google it? I'm gonna at least Google. No, I won't. What's the name of the guy who was in the series, not the movie, To Catch a Thief? He played Alexander Mundy.
Really?
In To Catch a Thief. He was married to Natalie Wood.
This guy was not married to Natalie Wood.
I know. Both of them were on the boat.
Christopher Walken.
I get him mixed up with
Christopher Walken
with Willem Dafoe.
Christopher Walken has placed this hit record producer who's brought in to rescue the Blue Oyster Cult's hit "Don't Fear the Reaper," and it's if you know that song, it's very heavy on the cowbell. And he says, what this record needs is more cowbell.
Where's the cowbell?
Add more cowbell, it gets worse and worse. And then he adds more cowbell, and it's a classic bit of bad advice for doing the one thing you're doing badly and doing more of it instead of cutting back on it.
I love that song.
There you go. It's a good song.
It is.
A little too much cowbell.
I don't even know where that comes in. I'll have to listen to it again. Okay. Anyway, anybody who mentions Blue Oyster Cult in the comments has our everlasting respect and adoration. We'll see you next week, and I'll have it more together now. I will have adapted to my new locale, and I'll even try to lure Fraser and Milo up here.
Great. Look forward to it.
Now, what does the parrot have to say? What is
Goodbye.
The parrot? Goodbye.